Hello, today we will speak about Embabel, the Spring AI feature or framework that help you to orchestrate agents and doing agentic AI. So I wrote an article on Fuji. Fuji is a community website where different authors from everywhere in the world share their knowledge about Java mainly. And so here my article, no keys, no LLM, building a Wikidata definition API with Embabel. So the section too long didn't read. I build a Spring Boot for API that defines terms via Wikidata. So the goal is I gave to my API one, and the API does the work to go fetch the definition through Embabel, who go ask agents who and those agents go ask endpoint on the public web, which is Wikidata, which has a lot of things, a big knowledge base. So no keys, no LLM, building a Wikidata definition API with Embabel. The endpoint looks like this one. We are on localhost 8080, and the fragment of the URL that we have to call is API/wiki/define term equal and the argument to ask what we want to define. So I define this article in a four part. First part, I will define quickly the concepts. The second part, we will browse the code that I use to build the application. The third part is the demonstration, so the demo, where I will use IntelliJ to show you the application, how it works, how it runs. And the last part is the conclusion. So the different concept. Part one, Embabel. Embabel is an agent framework for the GVM. I like to think of it as a way to model a workflow as action, steps the agent can execute, goals, what the workflow should produce with a final action, state facts, type, object available at each moment, and planning, decide which action to run and in which order to achieve the goal. So Embabel orchestrate some action, and it plans how he has to deal with this action, and in the end produce an output after querying this action that it orchestrates. Then Spring AI. So Spring AI, it is the starter, the lib of Spring Boot that you can use to deal with chat models. But here I will use no operation chat models because I don't want to use any API keys. I wanted just to illustrate how to use Embabel in a minimal way. So I ditch the part querying LLM. But we will see in the conclusion. Next step, once we have this minimal Embabel application, is to add LLM. Then the role of Embabel in this application. So you could say, yes, but in the end, you just query endpoint on the web. You could have done it just with Spring Boot web. Yes, okay, but with Embabel, you can orchestrate those calls to external API. And if one day you want to add something in between, you can just insert some processing without disturbing and without putting all in one service who does all the call. So this is a kind of thinking for the future insertion of steps in the application. And Wikidata is a knowledge base on the web. It's online, free to read, and the API are really easy to call from a small Java project. I use two endpoints, web search entities, to retrieve the most relevant term ID, and then special entity data, JSON, to fetch structure entity data. Okay, so we saw the concept, Embabel, Spring AI, Wikidata, and the role of Embabel, which is not only in the end calling a REST API, but it could do more. So the code, app building code plus explanation. So first, the POM. So for the POM.xml, I have used the Java version 25, and the version of Embabel 0.3.4. I think it is the last one at this day. Then I use the Spring Boot starter web. I exclude some dependency because there was a Jackson exceptions to be compliant with Embabel. Then I use the starter REST client to call the Wikidata endpoint. And then there was nothing else very important. Then in my application.yaml, the very thing that is important is Embabel models defo LLM NOOP. It is LLM that you have to define if to make your Spring AI work. So I needed to add this property to say that I use my own defo LLM, which is called NOOP. Then in the app launcher, note that I have added bin, which is the NOOP LLM with the name NOOP of the bin and a provider, and the class NOOP chat model we will see later. So the NOOP chat model, it is a classic chat model from Spring AI. You just override the method call, and you do some behavior which say there is no LLM. I just answer you with a kind of dummy message. Then for querying Wikidata on the public website of Wikidata, I needed some bean model classes, which is here records. And so here we have some records to be able to query and to store the data from the Wikidata knowledge base in our application. Then the repository. So the repository, it is to call the Wikidata endpoint. So you have a REST client, okay, which is named Wikidata. Then you have the constructor. Then you have the search first. There is two methods. Step one, find the first matching QID for a term. So this will help us to find some information used to, in the end, make our final answer. And in the step two, you fetch the label description from another Wikidata endpoint. So note the two methods, search first and then fetch entity details. This method will be used by the agent of Embabel. And then the rest is a boilerplate code to be able to serve this endpoint. Then the Embabel engine. So here it is the class the most important of this application because it is here that we saw how Embabel works. So you have WikidataDefinitionAgent with an annotation @agent, and then we have some action, findEntityId, which calls a repo with a search first and take as an argument something that come from the upper layers like a service and in the end a controller. And then we have another action, fetchDetails, which retrieves the WikidataEntityDetails, and the final action with the annotation @achieveGoal, which build the answer that will be returned to the service. Service running, we are AgentInvocation. So here is our service, the upper layer. So you load as attribute of the service the agent platform, and invocation, which is required to work with this service. So you define here like this, and then you call you load the constructor with all these attributes, and then you call in the define method invocation.invoke and your argument, which is a definition request with the term you provided in your endpoint call. And in the end, the controller, which has as attribute a WikiService, and that expose on the path API/wiki/defined with an argument request param term, and this will be used to call the endpoint. So now we have the demo. So the demo, I will call a curl request. So first I check that my application is start. I will clear here the content. So just to recapitulate, we'll see the README schema to see how it works in the process. So the schema just here, let me see. Okay, so we see. So I will call from HTTP GET request the endpoint. It will go through the WikiController. The WikiController will call the WikiService, which will invoke Embabel goal, and Embabel agent platform plans action to produce definition result. WikidataDefinitionAgent, which will call the first method findEntityId, which will produce a WikidataEntityId, then WikidataDefinitionAgent that will fetch the details and will produce a WikidataEntityDetails, and finally the WikidataDefinitionAgent that will build the answer. And this will then go back to the WikiService, then to WikiController, then to my endpoint. Okay, so now that my application is running, I will start with an example. For example, I will ask Fuji. Maybe it doesn't know this word, so you see there is a 404, but I could ask Azul, the company that lead the Fuji community. So city in province, Buenos Aires, Argentina. Okay. Open JDK. Java Development Kit. Okay. So you see, we put some terms. For example, we put some French dish, ratatouille. And this will call the agent, which will call the endpoint. Here it says that it is a movie, but it is in fact a movie. I will put another French dish, gratin dauphinois. And it says French dish. Okay. Then I use the example Kafka. And Kafka. Open data stream processing platform. I could also use a surname, a nickname of a technology. K8S, Kubernetes, and he is able to manage. So you see, it works, so no problems. So we have the curl, the response that we see in the Bruno application, and then in terms of logs, what can we see for the last one? So you see executing action, executed action. So he says when he is trying to execute an action, then it says when he has executed the action, then he says he's ready to plan from step to another step, etc. So you have some logs to understand what the agentic application is doing. Conclusion, as I said at the beginning, here I use a minimal application to show how to use Embabel, but in the end you should plug a LLM and also any steps that could be interesting, for example, multi-language, confidence score, caching and rate limiting, multi-source enrichment with a dbpedia, for example, or LLM for post-processing. So you see, there is a lot of possibilities to do with this kind of application. And the goal here was to illustrate how to use Embabel in a simple Spring Boot application. I hope you are pleased by the demonstration, and I wish you a good day and maybe see you in another video. Bye.